Welcome to September, everybody. It is the Wednesday Board Game Live. Our special guest is artist and publisher, Terrible Games. John, can you introduce yourself to our Wednesday viewers?
What's up, Wednesday viewers? Happy to be on the live. And yeah, my name is John DeCampos. I'm an illustrator, board game designer, and I run a small, plucky little company based out of Baltimore, Maryland called Terrible Games. We've been around for about 4 years, and I'm kind of the day-to-day guy. But we made a bunch of cool stuff, and I love me some board games.
And it's the reason that you made stuff that we're talking today, because September is product design month here on the Wednesday Board Game Live, and I was excited to get John on this because art can be considered a product. Art accessories can be considered a product, and of course, games themselves are not only an experience, a puzzle, a social experience, or I said that again, but a social activity, but they are also a product. So yes,
Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is, when you get into self-publishing, I think, it's easy to probably follow a template because there's a lot of board games that kind of do the same thing packaging-wise, that kind of do the same thing form factor-wise. But finding a little way to separate yourself from the herd a little bit can give you a couple advantages. I've tried to do that. Mostly, I would talk about the Token Terrors miniatures, because the whole reason I became a board game designer is because of my need for a miniature that is completely different as a product compared to what you typically see in the board game space.
Let's take a minute and tell that story. Let's talk about Token Terrors. Let's talk about how you arrived on it, what kind of business model you decided on. Give me a little bit of the backstory of Token Terrors.
Sure. So I have some right here. This is actually a nice example of some product design and packaging design as well. But you can see the Token Terrors in here. They're little knobby, dice-sized, durable mini monsters. And the reason I made them is because I'm a Magic the Gathering dork, and I love making decks that create a whole bunch of little guys. And me and my best friend Lucas were playing Magic, and we were playing decks that kind of did the same thing. And we had this board state that was completely flooded with little glass beads and dice and eraser heads and all this crazy stuff. And I was like, man, they haven't made a miniature that makes sense for this problem. Like, why isn't there a little dude I can toss in my dice bag that's kind of the same size as a dice, that doesn't have stuff sticking out that's going to get bent or broken? It's not pre-painted, so it's not going to get damaged, and they're not prohibitively expensive. Why doesn't that exist? And, 7 years later, we came to Kickstarter and had developed a whole board game around them. But it started with these things that were very travel friendly, were inexpensive to purchase, and were on theme monsters that you could use for Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons.
So you needed squirrel tokens and zombie tokens.
Yeah, we haven't made squirrels yet. They're on the list. We're going to make them soon.
Squirrel tokens. I have made so many Magic the Gathering squirrels in my time as you.
Yeah, as one
but zombie tokens, just drowning in zombie tokens. One
yeah,
tokens.
I have one of them. I have one that I actually had painted, but here's one of our zombies.
Aww.
And you can see that they kind of have like almost a chibi, like Keshi toy kind of motif to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I know you are a proponent against AI art. Are you a proponent about like AI search engine, like it grabbing content together and distilling it for you? For example, the definition of product design. So I Googled the definition of product design, and it falls into 4 areas. And we're going to talk about all those areas: research, ideation, prototyping, and iteration. But before any of that happens, before you do any of those steps in product design, you must identify a need.
Yeah.
And that is clear. Like, the groundwork for any fruitful discussion is set up the semantics, find out what you're discussing, and understanding why something works. And product design works when you first start with identifying a need. And you did that. Your story was very, I'm like, I baited him into doing it.
Yeah. Also, something else that's I think helpful that can help you get to where you figure out exactly what it is that you need to solve, the problem that you're trying to solve, is also figuring out like what your customer avatar is. And for me, I mean, I'd like to think that, like, you know, I'm sort of catering to myself in a certain way, but also in that way, like, I want the things that I support and that I interact with to have a general level of competency and, you know, maybe doing something a little bit different. So for us, just trying to really just find even little stuff where, like with Token Terrors season 1, we had this cemetery bag. In playtesting, we were like, it's really confusing to have destroyed units just sitting to the side. So each player should have like a little baggie that they put their dead guys in. And we were like, okay, let's take that one step further. We'll also make it a gusseted square bottom bag that is the same size as the board when you fold it up and the cards. So now if you don't need the rules or the box, all the tokens, all the paper product goes into one of those 2 bags, and it's super travel friendly. And that's small. Nothing about that is communicated on the box. We don't really talk about it in a big way, but at conventions and shows, it's always something we mention because it's another small little like comfort and like advantage that we can bring to the table.
All right, you talked about conventions, you talked about shows and iterative steps through product design. You blew through all of that. Like, that's the good stuff, John. Slow your horses just a little bit. But
Sorry.
As far as product design goes and who your avatar is, the number one example of that for the Gen Con audience in board gaming was the Luthier Dice Tower. Did you see that this year?
I did not.
Okay. So Luthier was one of the big blow-up crowdfund successes for this year. It is by a small Wisconsin company, and Dave leads the charge for that. Dave actually teaches game design at the University of Wisconsin Stout. Okay? And so Luthier is about making musical instruments, particularly stringed instruments.
I've seen some prototyping, and this particular game has been chatted about over the last few years on a group I'm in on Facebook called the Board Game Design Lab. I have seen it bouncing around a little bit. I just didn't see any of the coverage at Gen Con, but go ahead, sorry.
So the dice tower is, when you drop the dice in, it plays music. Because
awesome.
Because it's constructed in such a way that, like, you know, finger harps are in the inside, so the dice play a melody as they take down the. It is something as far as understanding who your audience is and what people would get excited about in a Gen Con environment. I don't think I have seen a better execution of what a conventioneer would be so excited to see. Like, internet audiences are very different than convention audiences in a lot of ways. And understanding what you can do to appeal to them is also part of product design. Understanding what business model you'll be chasing after.
I mean, a dice tower that has finger harps inside of it that plays a little tune sounds like a product that every Bard RPG player should own, regardless of what else is happening. That's just like, if you're playing a Bard, you should just have that.
I was speechless. It's shaped like a harpsichord, so you go, oh my god, it's.
Oh, that's great. That's really cool.
It is crazy.
That's a great way to get people talking. Yeah, that's a great way to get people in there and talking. And I'm guessing that there a dice tower actually included in the actual game, like a self-construct, like punchboard dice tower or anything like that?
I think there is. It's that high end enough, but this replaces that, and you're like, oh, of course. Like, every time. you can't see my hand drop. Like, but in my mind's eye, like, it is so fantastic. But so talk to me about some of your other games and products and the needs that they fit and the audiences that they fit, as an example, John.
Sure. So, I mean, one thing that we're really trying to do, and you'll hear a lot of conflicting advice from people within the industry that talk about like shelf presence and box size and things like that. And I think a more common refrain that we're getting now that people are in the hobby a little bit more, and there's a lot more discussion within the hobby, is box sizes that don't have a lot of fluff. And what we try to do is that exact thing. Like, for example, this came out of a bunch of this is like the fourth iteration of our box for our most recent release, Volca. And this started out as a regular box, but it turned into a magnetic clasping flap on this side. Yeah. And it fits everything. And we had to do 3 different versions of this recessed space at the top of the box that left clearance for all of the folded stuff that fits on top of there. And then the shape of this paper craft storage solution also went under 2 physical prototypes before we figured out that the expansion material and the cards from the core version, plus the dice and other components, would fit comfortably with this stuff on top and still be able to close and have the magnetic clasp keep everything inside safely. So, you know, this is version 4 that you're looking at that ended up going into final production, and that's just from us getting physical prototypes. And like, I could show you like Procreate design files of different versions of the Volca box that I sketched up in like 3/4 view with like sizing and things like that, which is usually something that I do with all of our releases. But it's never like right the first time. Even if you think all your ideas are really good the first time around, it's never right the first time.
No, iterating on that, but you're speaking to something that either your fans really care about or collectors see as important. I want to add this to my collection because, and I feel good in bringing this to the table because I look at this game and in its packaging, every time I open it up, I feel rewarded.
Yeah, and you know what, to speak to that really quickly, I think that what smart packaging design does and things that don't end up doing anything that feels unnecessary or anything that's about posturing for the sake of optics, because I think we all, if you're a board game collector, you probably own that game where the box is humongous and you open it up and 2/3 of the box is actually full. It's just all of this air. And you're like, why? And it's because, you know, they want it to have a big shelf presence. They want it to look good in retail. Maybe has something to do with it. But for me, and I think for a lot of people who appreciate something that is succinct in what it offers as a physical object, it shows a lot of care. It shows a lot of thought. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, speaking about the industry side of things, which I just want to touch on briefly, which you don't have to get into too much, for everybody who doesn't like mass-produced board games, a smaller box is really helpful for your bottom line as a publisher also. So there is that as well. But yeah, I think that even those choices like the magnetic clasping box and doing papercraft or even a vacuum-formed insert storage tray, these things just show that you're thinking about the end user. And there's a thoughtfulness and there's an amount of care that goes into the product that you're putting out.
And it is an extension of how successful your community is or your project is. When your project is the minimum it needs to happen for it to be a game, that's a different animal than, in this case, a squirrel. That's a different animal than if you're curating an experience for the collector and solo game enthusiast.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like a solo gamer is going to spend a lot of uninterrupted time in your game. So, like, have you seen Chip Theory's, like, chip case for Too Many Bones, for example?
Oh, yeah. I mean, those guys they have a reputation since the onset of just being completely, like, going premium with everything that they make, which I think is a great, like, if that's what's associated with your brand, that's awesome.
Yeah. It is crazy. You know, I did a underwater or in a pool demo of Too Many Bones with Danny Standering.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I did it at Captain Con in Warwick, Rhode Island at a convention.
That sounds fun.
It was pretty hysterical. The game not the instructions and not the box, but everything else is pool friendly.
That's wild. That's crazy.
So you just touched on something that's very important. When you're creating a product, you're also creating something that is an extension of your brand and an extension of your community.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
it is very interesting that the chip theory guys were able to take some of their audience and move them to 20 strong, which is a inherently different experience at $20 than at their like high-end crazy super experience.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And there's an economy at numbers, and there's something that's very real called the indie tax.
Mhm.
How would you explain the indie tax to people either at a convention or online, like in a gamer environment, like where people understand what indie is and understanding the indie tax?
I mean, I'll be real with you. I could probably guess at exactly what that is, but I don't ever think I've heard that particular turn of phrase before. I mean,
Really?
I'm almost positive as soon as you explain it to me and be like, oh yes, absolutely, I understand exactly what that is.
John, give me your guess what you think the indie tax is.
Oh man. Well, basically, we have limited resources, so we can't scale our per unit cost up into the tens of thousands of units. Which, if you're a bigger company, if you have a lot of revenue and capital to invest into your inventory, you can go, hey, we don't care. We know this game is going to sell 100,000 copies, so we're going to print 250,000 copies, and you dive bomb your per unit cost to as low as it can get. For us, we're producing 500, 1,000, maybe 2,000 units per run. So our scale cost per unit from the manufacturer is a lot more robust, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that is my functional definition of the indie tax. You
Yep.
understand by component per unit dollar, you're going to get more with something that has a much larger print run. So, as an indie, you have to offer something that is distinctly worth it to your fans and communities, or hopefully new fans. Okay,
Yep.
and this is also why small boxes and small runs, there's less of an indie tax because its total unit price is under a certain level, so you don't have to worry about that. But when you get to something this size, right? Like that's on a boat from China now, but I was only able to get 1,500 of those into a 20-foot container ship.
Yep. Yep. That's how it goes.
And that's how it goes in a world where that's very significant because we're in the middle of a shipping crisis. If people did not realize we are in another shipping crisis, and what that meant is it was $3,800 at the beginning of March to get a 40-foot container. It was very easily, like 2 weeks ago, to get a 20-foot container, $12,000.
Woof. I have some stuff coming in from overseas that just landed in the United States, so I'll be interested to see what our bill looks like because I was quoted something.
Oh my gosh! If you did, hopefully if it just landed, you got to the front end of it. You probably played somewhere in the middle between that, but it is insane. So. Like, and the cost per units for that. Like my cost per unit shot up. My cost $7 a unit.
Yeah. Yep. And you get into some other stuff too when it comes to like product design and value proposition as well, especially in the crowdsourcing space. I mean, for better or worse, it's a bit of a tight wire act kind of with Volca. There's safety pricing when you're not really sure if you're gonna be proven in market once you go out, or you price it competitively and hope that the number of pre-orders that you get in crowd sale is going to scale enough that you can go ahead and make that bigger purchase. So, for all
you see that happen a lot with I shouldn't interrupt, but you see that happen. I got very excited. You see that happen a lot with miniature-based games that hit a reasonable number, but then back out.
Yep.
You have $175,000. Why did you cancel the campaign? Because it needed to be much higher than $175,000 because of how we priced it. And so they're like, that ends up being a very real thing.
Absolutely. But, from the product design standpoint, I mean, the pricing is certainly part of the product design and thinking about all the different components that you want to do. I'm actually, I'm working on a game right now called Cardavers, which is it's got sort of a morose kind of theme to it, where you're the headmaster of a surgical school at the turn of the century, and you're trying to intake as many dead bodies as possible so that you can advance medical science. I'm hoping for something around that size, but initially the idea for the product is that it was going to be a mint tin game. I wanted it to be like in a small little like medical, like think about like a medical first aid kit kind of tin, like a 2-part tin. And the part of that is because of the indie tax, and because I think there's a ton of really great high content mint tin games out there. You look at the Tiny Epic series where the boxes are like this big and they have a ton of content. So I'm like, okay, how small can we make stuff? I start playtesting it. It can't friggin' be small. I'm not gonna be able to make it small, unfortunately. And that kind of stuff, you have to sort of take the good and the bad and weigh the pros and the cons and figure out, where the value proposition is on what you're trying to create, how you think you might want to price it, what kind of experience your buyer is getting. And all of this is folding into the art package, the color palette, the form factor of recess board, player interfaces, dice, all of this stuff.
We're talking a mile a minute about things that we have spent a lot of time with, John. Let's roll it back for a second. I'll say hello to everybody. Welcome to the Board Game Live. David, Sonia, it's good that you can show up. Sonia, I'm sorry that you have to run off so soon. This month's topic is product design. And John from Terrible Games has joined us, and we are taking ourselves through the steps of identifying a need, doing the research to make sure that it is something that people actually want, ideating to make the best version of it, prototyping so that you have something to test on, and then iterating again and again and again on these steps. Okay, so that is functionally what product design does. So most game designers in the indie space or start out with, I don't see a game like this, or which is good. At least they can have something, or less so is the need is I need to make this game.
Yeah.
The number of versions of Monopoly that a certain game manufacturer quotes every year is staggering.
Yeah.
I cannot even tell, like, I was asking one of my game manufacturer friends, like, what do you see a lot of? He's like, you'd be surprised how many people print 1,500 copies of a version of Monopoly that then they get shipped to them.
Stuff that's just like from people who are fans of like Firefly Monopoly that they make themselves?
No, it's like people who want to make a game, their only basis is Monopoly, and they're like, I want to make this game. And so they see that and they do that. And there are people who do this. If you're one of those folks, it is a way to start out. You are paying for your education, and that is more than fine. But you get what you pay for, and those folks and their journey shouldn't be discounted as a place to learn a lesson. We are shocked by the idea of like our garage filled with pallets of Monopoly. Like, there is no need for this game other than you need to make it. There is no sales channel for this game. And that is obviously a nightmare situation where a person was crushed by their dream. But what is really good is when somebody identifies, I have not seen a good place for squirrel tokens. What can I bring to the world of Magic that I myself could use? At the very least, I know that and that ended up happening with a lot of game accessories.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about your next projects, what is the need in there? Obviously, publishers have needs. They have commitments. What do you see you satisfying with your next game design or accessory project?
I mean, I'm in a little bit of a weird holding pattern right now because I'm waiting to deliver our last campaign for Volca, which I had shown earlier. I'll just go ahead and hold it up on the screen really quick for everybody who's here right now. This is about to deliver to backers in the next 2 weeks. So I have a bunch of administrative work I have to do to handle that. I'm also 2/3 of the way through with the Season 2 expansion for Token Terrors, which is Token Terror Season 2 Terror Rising. We're going to launch that next year. Also, very weird thing, and I'm going to try to steer it back into product design. This product right here is called the Token Terrors Battle Block, and we have this cool little bubble with 6 Token Terrors inside. You can see there's an illustration of their like biome underneath, so you have like a nest up in an eyrie up here, and inside is a tuck box with the components for a solo game that plays in about 15 to 20 minutes. These cost $12. I designed these after we completed the campaign for Token Terror Season 1. I was looking at the 6-pack boxes for just the miniatures, and I was like, it's another 80 cents for us to put a couple cards and punch board in there. I could talk to some indie designers, and we can make these into solo games. These got completely ignored. Nobody knows they exist because they never saw Kickstarter, and they were never a part of the initial Kickstarter campaign. So people at conventions have got them, and we sold them to a couple retailers. So now I'm thinking I want to do a little mini campaign with these on they already exist. I'm just going to pre-sell them on Kickstarter as a marketing thing. I'm working on 3 designs right now that I'm just kind of kicking around. And as far as like solving a problem, I think what I'm really trying to do is
for the record, and since this is an educational tool, you cannot crowdfund on Kickstarter something that already exists. So John's going to add something to that so that he's creating something new. Kickstarter has very... Oh, yeah.
Really?
What
about the Make 100 thing?
You have to be adding something new. It could be a new edition. Like, that's also why when you see reprints and other things, you've got to be creating something that is new.
All right. Well, glad I found that out now before I get too deep into it. I'll have to figure that out.
No, that's important. And this is the process working, John. This is why we go back and forth with each other, right? You cannot
absolutely.
use Kickstarter is not Etsy. You cannot use it for things that are already established. But if you were going to go, hey, we have this thing and we want to do these other solo cards with it, please help us Kickstarter. You can sell those 2 things together.
Smart. Okay, cool. That gives me something to think about at least.
Yeah, and it gives the people who are a fan of that thing something more. And the nature of stretch goals and people participating in the campaign to create something bigger is really the promise of crowdfunding. Okay?
For sure.
Crowdfunding's heyday was probably 2012, before potato salad. Once crowdfunding jumped the shark when potato salad hit the deal, and ever since then it has fluctuated, and we continue to see a big difference between people who have already established their communities and people who are just starting out. That disparity continues to grow every year on crowdfunding.
Yeah, but I've seen a lot of indie designers that started out around the same time as me, and I really think that the cheat code to making it in the board game industry is you just have to stick around. You just have to put stuff out like once or twice a year and keep giving a shit about doing your thing and push it forward and stick around. Because if you look at Jamie Stegmaier, even I always look at Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, in all of its form, for the first 10 years that it existed, no one cared about it. It wasn't a huge hit. It wasn't this gigantic cultural milestone. It was just this thing that everybody was like, whatever. And then it eventually found its footing and became this huge, cultural movement. And
Are you talking about the Satanic Panic? Like, I remember, I'm old enough, John, to remember Tom Hanks talking about putting a magic coin underneath his pillow and that it disappears that's the punchline to the end of Mazes and Monsters. Do you not know this movie, John?
No, I've not seen Mazes and Monsters, but I'm very familiar with the Satanic Panic.
All right, so I'm old enough to see Dungeons and Dragons hit a peak, then lots of valleys hit a peak, and it's happened multiple times. So
for sure.
And it will happen again. But each time when people got into the lifestyle, it got more critical mass. So the next time it ignited, it got really crazy. Like, if we're looking at, you're a Magic guy, you understand, like, it's been 32 years of Magic now, right? And Magic hit an all-time low at something called Fallen Empires. Fallen Empires was not only a bad set, it was manufactured poorly. And it was so dismal and so terrible. But then Magic figured out a new business model, figured out that they had created their own need, which was, why do these sets matter? And then they understood that they should run sets like sports seasons. And then Block arose, and suddenly they created their own need with how they made their product.
And from 2007 until about 2017, it was awesome. And then Wizards of the Coast took over, and now we're getting 19 sets a year, and it's absolutely insane. But that's 100% true. But I want to timestamp my they reinvigorated it. And then 10 years after that, Richard Garfield no longer had creative control. And so they published 20 years into Magic, the first sanctioned group play of Magic. Did you know that he had stonewalled, officially sanctioned group Magic for 20 Commander?
years? Any multiplayer Magic.
That's insane to me, because Commander now owns the entire, it's everything people talk about in Magic the Gathering.
Right, because it involves collectors, it involves the new sets, it allows new people in, it's group friendly, all of these things are reasons. But that is another thing, Commander met a need that they had created because of 20, really, John, I get so excited, I should stop yelling, you're fantastic. But they had created their own need by not letting people have an officially sanctioned multiplayer Magic, because that was written. I love talking about this. Richard Garfield sold Magic because he wanted to make the game he really believed in, the one he thought would change gaming, which was Robo Rally.
Yeah. I mean,
I love Robo Rally, but Robo Rally is for a very specific nerd.
I played a couple of those other designs, but I think one thing that I'm thinking about having this conversation and thinking about when I got into Magic, when it was actually hitting its stride, and when Innistrad and Amonkhet was coming out, some of my favorite sets of all time. There was something I wanted to parallel in the product design that we did with Token Terrors, and I think that a lot of new game designers and ones that are kind of dyed in the wool already are always kind of toying with this idea of not just creating a single game, but they want to create an expandable universe. They want to create a world where players can click in, there's a narrative, there's characters that they can attach themselves to, and it's a growing, expanding world that people can engage in. So even on purely creative and narrative side of doing product design, yeah, you can have a game about brewing beer or making a guitar or going to the grocery store or sitting in traffic. But if you're thinking about something in the long term, and if you're really highly aspirational, with a lot of new designers I run to all the time, is I got a great idea for a trading card game, and I'm hold your horses there, bud. Sorry, I don't mean to throw cold water on you, but getting into a trading card game at the onset, at the beginning of your journey, is a really easy way to make your life very difficult and be met with disappointment. But that said, you
you have unlimitedly deep pockets, and you can make the different products and different designs require different levels of runway, right? If your runway is the ledge between buildings, you got to take very different than if you've got a Dukes of Hazzard kind of situation with the ramp. There's very different ways of going about things. So let's talk a little bit about business models and how people plan for success. So welcome to the Wednesday Board Game Live, everybody. Today's guest is John from Terrible Games. We've been talking about product design because September is Product Design Month. One thing that John just touched on is an expansive universe, or a place for people to always go next. And I would like to talk about that in two ways. First of all, I want to say hi to Andy and DG Walker. But first,
hey guys,
two ways. Number one, there is something called the freemium model. In the freemium model, you'll see that in like apps that are taking advantage of people, like video apps and so forth and whatnot. But in gaming, it's generally 10% of the people are paying for the other 90% of the people play. Like, if you know that guy who always shows up to board game night, but really when you go and you look at their board game collection, it is like a decimal of what you have, that guy could be an example of how that is. The other example is giving your fans, and particularly your super fans, a way of showing their love for what you're doing with an unlimitedly high ceiling that you as a publisher can afford is good for them, and it is good for you. And thinking about how that works is the entire reason like these light up stands exist. Right?
Sure.
I saw a need in our game that we needed to be able to keep track of people's board states who had their magical girl transformation. This is the most ludicrous way to do that. But people who this is their game, this is their jam, they wanted something that they could not get anywhere else. Right. And lighting up like Sailor Moon was on their like holiday bingo card.
Yeah.
What is a particularly premium item that you have done in and around one of your titles going, yes, I know I'm only making 50 or 100 of these, but for those 100 people, they are going to lose their mind. They're going to be so happy they have them.
Soundtracks.
Ooh.
We've done 2 original soundtracks for 2 of our titles. So you can play our games and listen to original music that was composed specifically for that experience. And I'll push it a little bit more. Inside the J-card insert for the Black Mold soundtrack is actually the player interface for a solo roll and write called Black Mold Solitude.
That's amazing. And so it's on a cassette?
Well, you pop in the cassette and listen to the music, but there's a...
How do you find a cassette player, John?
You can buy them on Amazon for like $20. But people just collect cassettes. The tactile feeling and the form factor of these formats of music are really kind of great. And I mean, I'm a big dungeon synth person. I listen to all kinds of different music, primarily a lot of like really extreme metal, but I do love dungeon synth for sitting down and playing solo games or trying to get some work done. And cassette tapes are huge in that scene. People love cassettes in the dungeon synth scene.
That is amazing. You saw a need. You're like, hey, we could put content that is specific for this audience that loves this format, and we're going to give them quality stuff in that area. That is identifying me. That is also fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Princess has a soundtrack. Mouse Cheese Cat Cucumber has a soundtrack.
There we go.
So I understand loving those kinds of things. And it's an example of something where if creating things is your joy, and you want to be able to share that with your fans in a way that doesn't bankrupt your company, there is a lot of interesting things that you can think of. We spent too much time on the art novella for Mouse, Cheese, Cat, Cucumber. Way too much time on that. So you don't fall down that rabbit hole. But it is a fantastic thing. It is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I ended up delaying the delivery of Token Terror Season 1 because I promised our campaign backers that I was going to include a 40-page full-color comic book. And I had to do the whole thing myself. And I was like, no problem. I had like half of it done at the time when I made that promise. And it just took me a lot longer to get it all done. But we got it done. It's the last comic book I'll probably ever do.
John, it's like you and I are the same person. In Conquest Princess, there's a 40-page comic, a zine.
You know what? There's a special kind of masochism for somebody who puts a comic book inside of a board game, dude. It's just punishment on top of punishment. I swear.
The Conquest Princess comic book is fantastic. It's called Princess Zero. What was yours called?
Oh, it's called Chronicles of Chaos. I know I have a copy around here somewhere. This little guy.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Hold on, I want to show you my favorite splash page really quick because I didn't know when I did the artwork that it was going to turn out like this.
Oh, so
So it's a battle.
good.
I didn't know when I did the 2 pages. I didn't know they were going to do a 2-page spread next to each other, and this is like a beat for beat, like drag knuckle, tooth knockout battle between elves and goblins over the course of 2 pages. It's just like crazy. But yeah, I'm immensely proud of this work. It also delayed the project by a whole bunch. But that's another thing with the product design. Every time people open up this box, one of the most common things that we hear is they're just blown away by the amount of value because there's so much content. There's 12 sealed cards that you can unlock with legacy material and small little missions inside of this little tuck box. There's a comic book. The rule booklet has like a ton of visual aids and a little character named Dozen the Docent who like is your guide through the rule book that gives you little notes and instructions. And it comes packed with minis and the cloth bags and all the other stuff. There's not a product pitch. I'm just throwing out there.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Alex asked a question in chat. Do you want to grab this one, or do you want me to grab this one?
Sure. Any advice on figuring out manufacturing, distributing a new board game to individuals and retail? Yeah. So, Alex, if you're new to the business, getting into distribution and widespread like consolidation or distribution businesses, unless you have something that has a very proven value to people on Kickstarter, aka you probably break like the high 5-digit or 6-digit mark. Getting consolidation and retail on a wide distribution model might be a little bit difficult, but going to like a Gamma game fair would be a good place to shop your game around and get eyeballs on it in order to try to get that need. Something that I did on a small local level is I just reached out to every board game retailer within a 50 to 60 mile radius and stop by and show them what we have. Develop relationships with retailers that way, but something that's tricky is they're used to dealing with larger distributors and having one little seller that they have to pick and deal with and make transactions with can be a little. Usually they might shy away from that. As far as manufacturing goes, I can tell you from experience, there's of manufacturers in China and or abroad that are willing to take your business. I get solicited all the time from people who are working in a factory, who are a sales rep from a factory. Go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead,
let's
Seppy.
talk
I'll let you
about.
jump in. Sorry.
No, you are fantastic. I try not to interrupt, but you make me so excited, John. I start yelling. All right, so
Yeah.
what John said, you should do 100%. If you already have a game that you successfully crowdfunded and you got to, and you have inventory, you should introduce yourself to local retailers and get them to try to support local by having your game. You'd be surprised how many people have local sections, and it is great practice for you to be an advocate for your title. That practice alone is worth you spending the time getting in a car, driving, and listening to retailers, number one. So, End of the Line is on its second edition. The first edition, friends of mine had been successful with their indie title. The buyer for Games by James in Minnesota, they have 7 stores across Wisconsin and Minnesota. I set up a meeting with him. I had been in at that time. There was a local distributor in Minnesota that just did Minnesota board games. They were called Aladdin. I got in with them, and but how I did that was I first sold X number of copies to Games by James. Game by James said, "Hey, I'm going to try this out." With that, I was able to write up like a performance, or what we used to call a white paper for normal business. Aladdin carried it, and as soon as I had Aladdin carrying it and a white paper, I was able to go to other people and ask for the same thing. And that was but even going to consolidators, one of the first years of Gamma that I went to, one of the last years in Vegas, talking to one of your earlier points, John, I said, "Hey, we having a meeting. I'd like to talk to you about my game." And the consolidator literally said, "If you're here next year, we can talk."
Yep. I mean, Yeah, it makes sense. There's a bunch of other stuff that comes along with.
You're supposed to say, "Oh, Seppy, that's terrible. It's brutal."
No, I can kind of understand. I mean, it is kind of brutal. It's blunt as hell. I'll give you that. But like, I can kind of understand where dude is coming from, because that also goes to my other point earlier. I mean, to be honest with you, just in my experience in the indie space, I see roughly about 30% of the guys who start off as indies, who make a title, they successfully fund, a year, 2 years later, they deliver that game. Around 30% of that group goes on to do another release, who they actually stick in the business and do more stuff. A lot of times it's one and done. They make that one game, they crowdfund it. They're like, that was a cool thing I did once, and that's over. And no shade on that at all. I celebrate those creators and I try to support them anytime I can. But
this is not a life sentence, John. This is not a life sentence. You do not have to do this to yourself.
No, I don't plan on quitting anytime soon, but you know.
Yeah, neither do I. I've been doing this for now going on 14 years. So somebody asked the question of what's a white paper? A white paper is basically a searchable business document, like a PDF, that explains how a business or technical problem got solved by your methodology. So my white paper was basically why sales for end of the line made sense for businesses and distribution, like why people should carry it. And gaming, like nobody's like, what? Why did you write that? And I'm like, well, I have it and I can prove it with my math. And so, and people are like, oh, no, I don't want to do math. I'll just believe you. Here, take my order.
On the retailer side also, especially if they are just looking to get more foot traffic in and you have a little bit of social pull, you have like a nice like social circle you can bring into the store, asking them if they'll host you for demos, or like if they pick up the product, you can come in and run demos in the store, and actually creating a partnership with a local friendly game store can be hugely advantageous. I'll give a shout out to No Land Beyond here in Baltimore, who has been a huge supporter and champion for our releases. And they let us host a Tuesday, Token Terrors Playtest Tuesday, for like 4.5 or 5 months in the early days. And every once in a while, somebody came in to check out our game and maybe they bought something from them. But in the meantime, like I was playtesting the heck out of my game. And ever since then, you know, we've done demo events, we've done release events with them, and they've grown their business. We're growing our business. And that kind of stuff also can be really helpful for not just exposure, but ultimately like getting a couple retail orders and getting your game on a store shelf at a later time.
The number one thing that you want to do with retailers when you're starting out is figure out if you can get a person to be a champion or advocate for your game. It is really not enough for people to carry your games and put it on your shelf when you're just starting out. You do not have enough clout, and you probably do not have enough big enough packaging that your game sells itself. So the person who is making those sales happen, you should be thinking about that when you're thinking about your product design. Is this something that goes here in the store? Is this something like, there are a lot of games that are register friendly, but then I've had retailers say, should I just have 80 registers in my store then for all the people who want to be next to the register? For example, the Source Comics and Games, which is one of the largest and most well-established retailers for games in Minnesota, they've had 3 of our displays, our retail displays, by their 3 registers for like 10 years, and they constantly restock them. So everybody who walks in, and they're like a very substantial monthly something and so forth and whatnot. So when you are building these relationships, finding out how you can help them will give you a chance for them to get excited about you.
Yeah, and that also speaks to the product design side of things as well. You can think about retailers in that way. Like, for example, if you do a gigantic box game that has a bunch of expansion material, leave enough room in the main box for the expansion material. And also, yeah, shelf presence is definitely a concern, but case size and cubic feet that this thing fills up, because these retailers have to pay shipping costs the same way that our normal buyers do, and they pay $16 for a box to get shipped to their doorstep, and we pay for freight fees and all of that movement. The retailers have to pay for those carton counts as well. So all of this stuff when it comes to box size and product design and form factor and creature comforts and all these little things, there's a bunch of little boxes you got to check. The best thing to do, I think, is to just live with your game for as long as you can in its prototype phase before you pull the trigger on doing that big manufacturing order. And if there's one thing that any unpublished designers are thinking about or need to know, when you are about to get that manufacturing order done, ask for that final proof copy to physically come to your house and review it in person. Do that every time. It doesn't matter if that copy costs $200 or $300. Do it every time. You must do this.
All right, let's talk a little bit about finding a manufacturer. Now, you're going to pay for a lot of different things with the manufacturer, and apples to apples is a little harder to figure out than you can think. If you're going to go with, I'm going to get somebody who can makes this the cheapest, you usually get what you pay for. Somebody who is making it cheaper for you might not have that, like, installed cost, like sending you multiple prototypes during the process costs them money. So that might mean that their end of the, like, how much they're charging per unit might be larger, right? Or if you put all factors in, right? Tooling is a huge deal. Like, depending on how unique to your game the final manufactured components are, that can also drive up your price and can be, my cost per unit looks this way. Oh no, if you include tooling costs and so forth and whatnot, it's over there. How much they stand behind their work is also a major factor, and what quality of components and how long they've been in the business. Also, their payment terms are also a consideration for, like, if you have to pay them all up front for everything, that's different than if you can pay it this way, that way, and this way. So for those, and those are all factors and things that you should be asking about finding a manufacturer. The difficulty in finding a manufacturer isn't are there any, it's which ones are the best fit for where I am with my game and how much extra work I'm willing to take on. For example, Panda GM does a lot of our games. You are paying a premium for a lot of things with Panda. A lot of things. But if Peace of Mind, they stand by fixing anything that is wrong. Like, for example, there was a miscollation for processing way back in the day. They paid to pick it up, project manage the fix, put it back together, and send it back to me, and I had to do nothing and paid nothing.
Yep. Yeah, that kind of stuff is huge. I find that usually one of the differentiating factors on a manufacturer is communication skills and responsiveness is a big factor. I'm willing to pay extra for little component costs in order to have somebody who's able to communicate efficiently and answers me when I send them stuff. Because these people are more of, I mean, they're about as much of a business partner as somebody who gives you $20,000 to start your business. I mean, you got to hang your hat on their ability to produce stuff and deliver it safely and work with the right freight carrier and do all of that good stuff. So, yeah, there are dozens of them out there who are looking to make your game, but you do want to choose the right ones. And I would definitely recommend Gameland. I've worked with them as well. I've worked with Masia, who also did great work. And a lot of these companies, as they're getting a little bit bigger, are onboarding US-based reps who are able to basically be middlemen, but also like communicate things a lot more clearly and more succinctly so that you're able to kind of get things moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, I generally quote 3 to 5 of them for a project, and then I walk through the quotes and see how I feel about their communication style, their timeline, and another factor is prototypes for reviewers and how that goes out in the reviewer cycle. A roster of 12, that seems about right. Hopes it didn't get mentioned. Those guys should be mentioned. what should be mentioned. I would look at those people too, on top of the people that John said.
Yeah, I mean, really, any of these guys who are posted up at the board game conventions, if you see them 2 or 3 times throughout the year at board game conventions, they're handing out demo boxes and they're there to make FaceTime and meet people. I mean, they're obviously in it to win it. If they've flown people all the way across the freaking ocean to come to a U.S. board game convention just to glad hand with hobbyists and a handful of publishers who happen upon them, you know? So those guys are definitely like a good look as far as like first timers and people who are looking to break.
For example, Princess is so huge. Our Panda rep came to Gen Con with the final prototype, and we walked through it together at Gen Con while they were setting up the Panda room.
Awesome.
Like being able to do that with a game that's $95 MSRP. That's very different than if I have to do this with a game that's $13, right? Like. Yep. This is a pack and and different things require. And John's earlier advice, I don't care if it's this or it's this, make sure you get a physical copy before you approve it.
Final proof. Final, hash, final version 4 final proof. Always look before you
don't
get it.
Don't use done and don't use final. Call this a manufacturing prototype copy. I like calling it an MPC, which is this is the thing that you are going to produce.
Yep.
Right? Your manufacturer prototype copy. So that when your manufacturer looks at it, they know it's supposed to be like this thing, and it is the thing you agreed upon. That is gold, John. That is gold.
Gotta do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, John. You have been a wonderful guest. I've yelled at you and interrupted, but I will continue to try to be better.
No, you're good. You're good, Seppy. It's always a pleasure.
What kind of closing thoughts do you have for people in the wrap-up? What do you think in the topic around product design? What do you think that people should take as the golden rule or the golden lesson from your experience?
Steal ideas from other people who have better ideas than you and incorporate them into your stuff for intuitive, smart products that people know how to interact with, that they can onboard quickly and maybe will do something a little bit different visually on the shelf, but will really wow them when they actually open up the box and go, oh, that's a really thoughtful thing they did. Oh, look how smart this thing is that fits right in here. Oh, look at this cool little detail they included that makes it so everything packs up nice and neat. They put a little diagram on the inside of the lid that shows me how to put everything away. These are all things. Just think about the end user, and especially if you're a budding designer and publisher, then think about your experiences as a hobbyist, because I assume you probably are some level of a board game hobbyist, and then just try to melt down all those things you love about smart packaging and smart user interactive related things, and melt them down into your thing so that you can have it do as much as possible without hopefully breaking the bank or having your on-shelf MSRP be ballooned up to crazy amounts. If you can do that, if you're able to.
I call that the One Piece rule. If in the One Piece anime, there's nothing in any universe that the One Piece guy, Oda, thinks doesn't belong in the One Piece universe. And if you see something and you want to incorporate it, there's place for all good ideas in your thought process. We did have one more deep question, and I'm going to take it because they were so patient. Alex wanted to know, when choosing a manufacturer, should we also consider sales tax, VAT, and import duties in that country? Now, that is a very specific question to where you are set. For example, board and card games in the United States at this time have zero duty or tax coming from China. But that is something that you should look at. Like, it can be regional. If you're choosing a freight forwarder, I would very much not take their word for what the duties and taxes should be. I would ask another game professional in and around that particular translating from point A to point B. So that question is, shouldn't I consider it? Yeah, the idea is absolutely you should also then talk to somebody else and they will tell you, if I'm manufacturing in this geographic location and I want to fulfill out of this geographical location, is there a consideration that I should be thinking about? I think that's the best answer to that question. I think that is a full answer. Very proud of myself. I'm not going to do any better than that, John. For me and the Wednesday Board Game Live, thank you all for showing up. Next week, we have James Hudson, Druid City Games. That's Tidal Blade and Wonderland Wars on. And he's going to talk about product design for a small company, for product design versus a big company, product design for a small box, or product design for a big box. And we're going to go back and forth on that particular topic. If you've never seen James speak live or seen him as a guest, James is fantastic. I think you should all check that one out next week. Anything else, John, that you want people to know about?
Sure. If you're interested in any of our titles, go to tokenterrors.com. Our big seller right now is this game right here. Oh. This is called Black Mold, and this is one of those big boxes with a bunch of storage trays, and I had to do 4 different versions of figuring out the packaging design for this. But this is a horror survival game that's great for the fall season, spooky time, where you're a prisoner in an abandoned subterranean prison compound, and there's a bunch of poisonous black mold filling the corridors that are lining your escape. And in order to make it out alive, you'd have to limit your exposure to the environment. And we simulate in the game that sensation by having players' turns last as long as they can physically hold their breath.
Have you ever played Cave Evil, John?
I have seen a copy of Cave Evil twice. I've never sat down and played it, but Cave Evil is a loose inspiration for what we did with the art package for Black Mold, as is Escape the Dark Castle or Escape the Dark Sector, because it's all monochromatic and it's
all right. So for folks who don't know, and that could be your holy grail game, that guy only makes like X number of copies. It's a very short run, and he basically prints them as solid cardboard that it is practically a brick. Like if you've ever picked up Cave Evil. His other titles are The Mushroom Eaters or After Pablo, about running a cartel after Pablo Escobar. Like, these are some seriously deep and dark themes. But that business model was, I'm making this game, I have a need, I'm selling these games, I'm only making a certain number of them. They need to exist. And Cave Evil is like, as soon as I saw Black Mold, I'm like, oh my gosh, it is an iteration on Cave Evil. That game is crazy. It also takes an infinite amount of time to play. So when your game is functionally how long you can hold your breath, I was like, that's what Cave Evil needed.
Yeah, our Black Mold runs like about 20 to 30 minutes per player, and it really sings at like 3 to 4 players. So you're looking at maybe an hour and a half.
That's amazing. I love that so much. All right, so everybody, please come back for Product Design Month continuing this month. We also have Dodeca Donuts returning. I probably need a guest for the very end of the month. I've been asking a few people, but everybody is either going to a World Series of board games or something else, but I have to figure out a final guest for the 25th. But if chat, you know of somebody that I should have as my final guest for Product Design Month, let me know. Otherwise, we're here in the final moments. Any last goodbyes, John?
No, I mean, thanks for everybody who hung out today. I recognize a handful of these fine folks, and thanks for having me on, Seppy. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you in person and online. And yeah, I think I'm looking forward to seeing what we both do in the coming years, making more cool, weird, independent titles. Let's keep it up, man. Neither of us are going anywhere, so let's keep on getting after it.
Well, October is coming up. Maybe I should do spooky season in October. You have some very spooky season games. I'll have to think about that. But John, you're fantastic. And thank you for spending time with the Board Game Live. You are all great. And like I say every week, everybody, please stay safe and have fun. Bye, everybody.